Hi guys, welcome back to Nico Talks Hockey. Today I want to talk about narratives and general consensuses on players because we're talking about players who I think are overrated and players who I think are underrated. In fact, I'm talking about who I think are the five most overrated players in the league and who I think are the five most underrated players in the league. So it's all about kind of where people have them rated and where people think of them when they think about what their role is on a team, and then where I think the reality is. So again, it's definitely subjective. This is not like set in stone. Like all the stats back up what my opinion is here. But I also think that yeah, I think there's I'll back up what I believe here, definitely, for sure. Like I won't just say it and then move on. So I'm gonna start with an underrated player, and then I'm gonna go over it, and I'm gonna keep going back and forth for this video. So without further ado, I do want to get into one honorable mention here. One honorable mention for my most underrated players I have to throw in because he's off to an unbelievable start. It's Wyatt Kaiser. Wyatt Kaiser, for each one of these players, both underrated and overrated, I'm going to be looking at their points per game over the past 3 years. So just like not actually counting this year yet. I don't want to factor in this year too much. Just kind of over the past 3 years, which players have flown under the radar and which players are definitely thought of too highly. So yeah, Wyatt Kaiser I think is an underrated player for sure, because a lot of people don't even know who he is. When you ask who's Wyatt Kaiser, they might not even know what team he plays for. And if he is known, it's kind of thought as like, oh well, he's like maybe a third pairing defenseman. Maybe he doesn't even crack the lineup if he's on a really competent team. I definitely disagree. I think the reality is that he is a top four defenseman. I think he's like your fourth defenseman. But he's a fantastic shutdown guy. In fact, this season, I mean, factoring the past 3 years for sure, but I just want to throw this in. I guess this is not why he's in one of the top fives here. He's not in the top five most underrated because I am including a little bit of the season for him. But for this season, just for the record, he has been leading like the deep analytics for like best shutdown defenseman this season. So it's very impressive stuff from a very young Wyatt Kaiser. He also makes really nice breakout passes, so he's kind of he kind of does it all a little bit. Obviously, the offense isn't there much. He has a 0.18 points per game, so 0.18 points per game, nothing crazy like that. But in terms of shutdown defense and breakout passes, he's definitely a guy. So yeah, moving on to the top five underrated. At number five, I have got Jake Allen. I think that Jake Allen, the consensus for him is that most people would think of him as like he's an average, to above average backup goaltender. But I think that he's much more than that. In fact, when you look at all the backup goaltenders, there's only two I have above Jake Allen. That would be Joseph Woll and Charlie Lindgren. I think he's a top three backup goaltender in the entire league. And he obviously, when your main goalie's out, like Jacob Markstrom is, he can absolutely fill in that role. So Jake Allen, I respect the hell out of him. I think he's an awesome goalie, and I think that he needs more respect to his name. He, for the past 3 seasons, has been averaging about a 900 save percentage. Nothing crazy, but when you look at all the backups in the league, all the money goes towards the main goalie, and rightfully so, obviously. But for what Allen's making and the numbers he puts up and the consistency he puts up, it's really impressive. Now going on to a overrated player, I'm gonna go right here to Andrei Svechnikov. So when talking about Andrei Svechnikov, a lot of people think of him as like this kind of future consistent, like eventually he'll get to this 30 plus goal scorer, and maybe like a top 20 winger in the NHL. And I just don't think that's the truth. When you look at his stats, I mean, I know he gets around a 0.8 points per game, so he's under a point per game. And I think that everyone's expectations of him kind of inflate what he actually is. Everyone expected him to get to like this 30 goals plus. He's so young, so he's got lots of time. But year in, year out, he proves that this is who he is, and that's fine. That's totally fine. He's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. The reality is that I don't think he'll ever get to the kind of the expectations that everyone sets for him. And he's, instead of like a top 20 winger, he's like a borderline top 30 winger. 30 something, I'd say. But yeah, moving on to the another underrated player. Another underrated player is Thomas Harley. Legit one of the most underrated players in the league, because what he actually is he's a borderline top 10 defenseman. Like, he is right on the cusp there of becoming like a top 10 defenseman in the entire league. And he is not rated like that. When people think of Thomas Harley, they think he's good. Like, he's definitely like got some, he's got some recognition. But most people think of him as like a borderline top 20 defenseman instead of what I think he is, which is a top 10 defenseman. So yeah, he's unbelievable. Whether it's breakout passes or his points per game is 0.61 points per game. That's awesome. So he's got offense. He's got, he's so smart. When you think of a smart hockey IQ hockey player, think of Thomas Harley. His defense is there, his offense is there. He's a complete package. Thomas Harley's super underrated. But another overrated player, I've got Pavel Buchnevich of the St. Louis Blues. Now, before Blues fans get at me, there's actually an underrated player I have on the Blues that I have later on this list, so don't get too mad at me. But it's just that I don't really like this player at all. It's Pavel Buchnevich. So Pavel Buchnevich, kind of what the general consensus of him is that he is this kind of core top six forward piece. He can play center sometimes, but he's mostly a wing. That's kind of what he's looked at. I don't think that's always the case. In fact, I think it's more not the case than it is. He does average 0.85 points per game, but I think a lot of those points are empty calories, for lack of a better term. I think that he feeds off a lot of his line mate's success. I don't think that he's able to drive a line very well at all. I think he's more of a complementary winger. I think, yeah, he can still be top six if you want, but he's like your last piece of a top six if you're trying to build it out. And I just honestly don't love his consistency or his effort. He doesn't play defense like almost at all. So yeah, it's just inconsistent effort. It's very, I can see it, and I don't like what I see that much. Not to be too harsh, but yeah, Pavel Buchnevich, again, he can definitely be in the top six. It's just I think he's a little overrated. Moving into our underrated again. At number 3 for underrated, I've got Jesper Bratt, one of the best players in the league, and definitely one of the best wingers. Bratt's unbelievable. I think that a lot of people look at him as like, when they think of him, yeah, they know he's good. They know Jesper Bratt's great. But how great? Well, he's really, really great. A lot of people think of him as like maybe a top 20 to 30 winger, somewhere in there. It's a little bit, it can vary, I think, for what people think of him. But what do I think of him? Well, I think he's a top 10 winger in the NHL. Over the summer, I made my rankings of all the positions: wingers, centers, defensemen, goalies. And he's in the top 10. And I definitely hold true to that. He's just the model of consistency. Bratt is so consistent year in, year out. It doesn't matter what line mates he's got. It doesn't matter if Jack Hughes is injured or Nico Hischier is injured or the team's bad or the team's good. He's going to be Jesper Bratt. So yeah, love him. I love his consistency. He's one of the most underrated players in the league. But another overrated player, it's sad to say this because it's a former Blackhawk, it's Dylan Strome. Now, I want to preface this. Washington Capitals fans, don't mean to stir the pot. I'm not doing this artificially. I genuinely believe that what people think of Strome right now isn't reality. Now, he's very good. Like, Strome is genuinely really, really good. But I do think that last year was a bit of a career year. I think that last season was an outlier. And now I don't think it's too much of an outlier. I just think it was a bit of a high. And I think that this year and the rest, for the most part, will not reflect last year's totals. I've seen a lot of people look at Dylan Strome as potentially like a top 12 to 15 center in the league. And I just don't think that's true. I know that his analytics are good, but I do believe that, last year with, hitting the highs that he did, it was largely due to, Ovechkin, and the vibes and Ovechkin going for that, the goal scoring race and all that. Again, I think he's like a second line center a poor man's first line center, but I do not think he's a top 12 to 15 center, which I've seen a lot of people say that he is. Moving back into the underrated, another underrated player, number 2 underrated here. I've got Matt Boldy. Talk about not getting the flowers. I think maybe it's finally coming because of this season. I'm starting to see a few more people sort of recognize how good the duo of Kirill Kaprizov and Matthew Boldy is, but still, I think he should get a lot more recognition. Matt Boldy, he's averaging 0.86 points per game. He's the expectation or kind of the consensus about him is that he's like a top 30 winger in the NHL. He's better than that. He's Matt Boldy. He's a top 20 winger. I think that there's absolutely he's a top 20 winger. He's just he's also consistent, but he's also like consistently getting better too. I talk about this a lot on the channel, but like what I think of part of what goes into how I rate a player or how how much I think they're really good is if you can produce offense and create offense even if you don't have the line mates to do it. You will it into existence. I look at David Pastrnak as an example of that. I look at William Nylander, another example. So I look at Connor Bedard, but Matthew Boldy. I mean, they don't have the craziest of line mates. Often he's not on Kirill Kaprizov's wing. He has been playing there recently, but whenever he's not, he's still Matthew Boldy. So yeah, no, he's unbelievable, and he can create that offense just purely by himself too, which is just so impressive. He needs to be talked about more. He is so underrated. Moving on to the overrated again. I've only got 2 more overrated players, 1 more underrated. A player who I think is overrated, and by a lot still. It's kind of crazy, but I think it will eventually come down. It's Brock Faber of the Minnesota Wild. Not to just talk about another Wild player and Boldy, but, I think Faber had an awesome first season. I really do. But then he signed that contract, and good for him, because I don't think he'd get the same contract signed today. 3rd season in the NHL, and look, the offense can be there, but it's also streaky and it's not that consistent. And then the defense is not that impressive to me. I think that there are players who are much better defensively who are paid a lot less than what Faber is being paid. So for this one, this kind of my ranking of him, it kind of goes a lot on his contract. He's obviously, I think, making more than I think he's worth, so to speak. But again, that's nothing against him. Good for him. Get the bag. It's just, but also a lot of the general population, I think, looks at Faber as kind of like this. I don't know. They look at him. I mean, he makes what is he making in terms of points per game? He's getting something like he's getting 0.47 points per game. So that's not that crazy, right? The consensus that he's this low end future 1 defenseman. Like your top defenseman, kind of low end though. I don't think that's the case. I think he is a solid top 4 defenseman, kind of your 3rd D, 3rd best defenseman on a team, but he's not your number 1. And I think that a lot of people are still seeing him as that because of his awesome rookie season. So yeah, I'd like to change those kind of that consensus around him. And then lastly, on the underrated, I think the most underrated player in the entire league. It's Robert Thomas of the St. Louis Blues. He's the number 1 center in St. Louis, and he doesn't get talked about enough. Robert Thomas, he averages over a point per game, 1.03 points per game. He's unbelievable, and he's defensively minded. He does it all. He doesn't always have the best line mates in St. Louis just because they're not the most strong of teams. But he's awesome. Tons of assists, one of the best playmakers in the entire league. And he deserves more recognition. He deserves more credit to his name because Robert Thomas, I mean, he's legit. I think I'd probably have him somewhere in the 12 or 13 range of top centers in the entire league. Lastly on this list, I have the last overrated player. In my opinion, this is the most overrated player in the entire league. Someone who I still think is really good. All these players I think are good. It's just about kind of consensus and the rankings that are around them. It's Rasmus Andersson. He averages 0.5 points per game, so half the games he's getting a point. I think a lot of people look at him as like this kind of low end number one defenseman. I don't think that he's that at all. I think he's more of a number one defenseman than like a number three defenseman, but he's like a number two. He has a great offense. I think that his offense is really cool. He can run a power play. That's awesome. I kind of like Brock Faber. I don't like his defense. I like his defense much less actually than Brock Faber. He's practically a forward out there who just plays on the blue line. So again, think he's a great player. Just think he's way overrated. But that's the point of the video, and that is the conclusion of the video. 5 overrated players who I think are the most overrated in the entire league, and then 5 underrated players with an honorable mention. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think. I think this will be more of maybe a hotly contested video. I know there's people feel very strongly about their players, so I get that for sure. But let me know in the comments below some other players maybe who are underrated, or some other players who are overrated in your opinion. Love to hear your opinions on that. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing. It would mean the absolute world to me. And I will see you guys in the next video.